Hi everybody, welcome to MJ on Watch. It's been a very long time and I decided to do something very different. This is a very special video and I chose today specifically to post it because it is actually the anniversary for this one person that this story involves. Now you know me with my films. I love films. And once I figure something out that is true, I am going to figure out what it is. I'm going to figure out the real story, the evidence. I want to know the truth. Whether it's a scary film, a crime film, whatever it is, I want to know the truth. And I actually discovered that this one film that I have been obsessed with since I was a teenager, I only found this out 4 years ago. It's based on a true story. I couldn't believe it. And I just became so obsessed. So 2 years now, I worked so hard on this video. Get all the information, build the timeline, everything. I've done everything for you guys. Now all you have to do is just sit back and relax. So what I'm going to give you guys today, it is actually called the 1924 Loeb Leopold murder case, and it was also labeled as the trial of the century. Now, you guys might be wondering, why is it labeled that? I've never heard of this case before. What is this? So, it was labeled the trial of the century because it involved wealthy intellectual teenagers committing a murder, and this case literally shocked the whole nation. Don't mind that. I have a blue jay knocking on my window every single day, every morning, so there's nothing I can do about it, but we're going to go forward. So if you continue to hear that, try and tune him out. But yes, this trial really shocked the whole nation because it's bizarre. It had a bizarre blend of Nietzschean philosophy, which I will get to in a second. It also had sexual intrigue and high stakes of legal arguments against the death penalty. Okay, so this philosophy, the Nietzschean philosophy, is a radical call to affirm life. It embraces individualism and creates a personal meaning to a world devoid of objective, universal truths or traditional religious morality. And these people famously just proclaim, basically, God is dead. And they urge humanity to overcome anarchism, reject passive moralities, and live creatively through the will to power. So rather than mere survival, they basically believed the primary driving force in humans is the ambition to expand, create, dominate, and achieve excellence. These are atheist people. So with this trial, there have been, of course, films made about it, because why else are we here? Why else am I going through all this with you? So they did have movies, TV shows, but I'm just going to give you the top 4 films. That way you know what they are. So the first movie ranked as number 1 is Rope. It was made in 1948 by Alfred Hitchcock. Number 2, Compulsion, made in 1959. Number 3, Swoon, made in 1992. The 4th and final film, which I'm going to be focused on, and I want you guys to focus on, is Murder by Numbers, made in 2002. This was a film that really shocked me. I did not know that this was a true story. And the film takes the general idea of this case and creates a new fictional narrative. And it's inspired by the events. If you guys have never seen it, wait till you listen to this whole entire case. Please go watch it. And you cannot believe the accuracy of that movie. I wish I could contact the writer, because it was just phenomenal. This film is a masterpiece. It was down to a T in their own way, so that way it was still pretty much fiction of how things happened, but certain details, it was just unbelievable. Like, you cannot make this up. But anyways, without further ado, let's get started with the Leopold Loeb case. Richard Albert Loeb was born on June 11th, 1905 in Chicago, Illinois. He was the second born out of 4 sons of the parents named Albert and Anna Loeb. Albert Loeb began his career as a Jewish lawyer for Roebuck and became the vice president of Sears. Besides owning an impressive mansion in Kenwood that was actually 2 blocks away from this boy's accomplice, which they have not met yet, but small world, right? The Loeb family had a summer estate called Castle Farms in Charlevoix, Michigan. Albert hired a governess named Emily Struthers to assist in his boy's upbringing. And it involved, school, how to behave, how they should be at home, etc. Richard was known to be an avid reader. So Richard had a passion for historical novels and crime stories, which I'm assuming that's possibly where this whole interest of crime ignited before it even began. So Richard entered University High School at just age 12. He was very outgoing and very popular. He thrived in his rich learning and the social environment that the school provided for him. Like, he even joined clubs, the Freshman Literary Society, the Discussion Club, and even an engineering club. But at home, it was a completely different story with Richard. Richard grew increasingly resentful towards Emily because of her unceasing demands. Because most of the days that he's studying, his friends are going out for the day to do baseball, or they're going out to fish and spend time together. And Richard had nothing to do but study every single day, every week, every hour. Like, Emily was literally breathing down his neck to make sure he's getting all these assignments done. And it drove him crazy, okay? So Richard actually stated, "I formed a habit of lying just to get by her," which I completely understand. Because if you are trapped in a house all day, constantly doing nothing but studying, you don't have any time with your friends. When you do have breaks, she probably only gave him 15 minutes to take a break. And I wouldn't even be surprised if he constantly had to say, "I need to go to the bathroom," just so he can hide out in the bathroom for like an hour, or jumped out a window to be gone for an hour, something. If you feel like you're constantly being watched by a hawk, you have no breathing room, you're going to start lying, you're going to start finding a way to get what you want, just so you can feel normal, you can have a little life, So Emily Struthers concluded that Richard was an exceptional student and told the parents he should accelerate in his studies. So Richard, thinking he's got a lot of homework now, no, it's worse now. So I think out of all the 4 boys, Richard showed the most promise. Just he was so smart and probably got things quickly. Richard showed distinct manic characteristics at a young age, and you need to think of a Jekyll and Hyde situation. At school, very popular, very social, outgoing, athletic, and then at home, you get a more sinister personality with Richard. Now, no one knew if it was a result of rebellion at the constant demand of his education that made him have a Jekyll and Hyde type of personality, or it was actually some deep psychological flaw in here. But no one really tested him. So, because Emily pushed him so hard, Richard actually graduated high school within 2 years. So he did struggle with large amounts of homework, constantly pushed by his governess and her breathing down his neck. But it was a major accomplishment to just graduate high school within 2 years. So he graduated just after his 14th birthday. Because remember, he started high school when he was 12. Unfortunately, with Richard's rapid glide path, it left him socially and intellectually unprepared for the demands of his new curriculum at the University of Chicago. By 1921, after 1 year of mediocre grades, he crossed paths with an intellectually intense and aloof boy named Nathan Leopold, which in the film, his name is Justin. You can't have 100% truth in a film, right? Now, Nathan was currently 15 years old and attending Harvard School for Boys. So the reason why he was there at the university was because he wanted to prepare to attend the university the next fall. So he's just there on campus, taking a look around, see what degrees they had available for him to study. And, any high school student who's about ready to graduate is going to do that. They're going to go on the campus, see what it's like, and just get a feel of it, And Richard, who was currently enrolled and attending there as a freshman, crossed paths with him. Now we're going to focus a little bit on Nathan. I started off with Richard because he seemed to be the one that was pretty much the leader in everything. So now we're going to learn a little bit about Nathan. Nathan Freudenthal Leopold Jr. was born on November 19th, 1904 in Chicago, Illinois, to the parents named Nathan and Florence Leopold. So I can already tell that in his household, he's only going to be called Junior because he's named after his dad. They were a wealthy Jewish family from Germany, and Nathan was the son of a millionaire box manufacturer who indulged Nathan's every whim after his mother passed when he was young. Nathan was a child prodigy who spoke his first words at the age of just 4 months. He did have 2 siblings and a cousin also living with him, but he was just the smartest one, I guess. He also became an accomplished ornithologist at a young age, which is a zoologist, but they are pretty much only studying birds. Like, he loved birds. He even had bird glasses and everything to look through. Like, it was amazing. And by age 18, we're going to jump ahead just a little bit, but then go back. He had mastered 9 to 10 languages fluently. He was an advanced botanist, a nationally recognized authority on birds, of course, and a scholar of the classics in philosophy. Now, we're going to go back. Now, with Richard and his hovering governess gone, like completely gone, she is not monitoring him anymore. He's off in college, at the university, he's out having fun. You know, he spent his weekends drinking, socializing with friends, and picked up a lot of girls, because why not? Your governess is gone. You can do what you want. You have freedom. You can study anything you want. You don't have to go to class if you want. Like, he was up the moon. Okay. All these activities, unfortunately, made Nathan bored. He didn't want anything to do with it. Richard charmed everyone with being athletic, his good looks, and cool manner, while Nathan was very awkward looking. He was undersized and had bulging eyes, and by many accounts, he was very sensitive about his appearance and tended to hide in Richard's shadow very often. Now, obviously, these two boys were just dramatically different. The only things that they seemed to have in common were just two rich boys living in the suburbs. The relationship between these two was very intense. Nathan said Richard was jealous of the food he ate and the water he drank, and the boys quarreled often. Nathan was apparently annoyed by Richard's mental lowliness, not loneliness, lowliness, and immaturity. So why not just part ways? But I get it. If you are awkward looking, you don't really make connections with other people. And here, the most popular boy in school, the it boy, is looking at you, paying attention to you. You feel connected. You have a connection. And you actually have somebody to talk to and accepts you for who you are. And I can see that he'd want this bond, even though Richard just bugs the crap out of him. And Nathan actually made a statement about what he thought of Richard. And I've obviously grabbed more statements that he had made, and I found these at famoustrials.com. Everything with my sources, everything I found, I've actually included them in the link below my video if you guys want to take a look, because I can't share every single thing on here. So Nathan's statement on what he thought of Richard was, you just couldn't figure Richard out. Those quick alternations of mood and sudden changes of mind, that was nothing compared to the real fundamental contradiction of his character. Everybody went for the guy. His charm was magnetic. He was basically able to charm anybody he put his mind to. Lots of people who thought the world of him would be surprised to know his real thoughts about them. He looked down on nearly everybody, but they never knew it. He was at home with everybody from college presidents to the homeless. They were all the same to Richard. He blended in with his environment, and he did all this so effortlessly. He seemed to have an inborn knack of making friends and winning everyone's affection. I tried deliberately to copy his mannerisms to be consciously charming, and I couldn't even come close. More often, I just alienate people. Richard didn't have to try. He just seemed to push an imaginary button and turned on the charm. He could be generous to a fault, but then there was that other side of him. So at this time, Nathan is already seeing the Jekyll and Hyde characteristic of Richard. I'm sure that also intrigued him, kept him on his toes. He didn't really know what type of Richard he was going to get. So in 1921, Richard started his path toward crime. It began at cheating at cards and soon progressed into smashing car windshields and store windows. It was like crime thrilled Richard, and over time his attention drifted to more serious offenses. Obviously, otherwise, why are we here? While recognizing that lying was wrong, he always had an elaborate fabrication ready when caught. He developed an elaborate fantasy life as a master criminal. Which, why wouldn't he? If he's getting caught with the things he's doing wrong, he always had a backup plan. He always had an explanation with why he was doing it, or no, I didn't do it. It was this person, or whatever. He always had a story on hand. And if he's getting away with it, not suffering any consequences for the damage he is doing, of course he's going to think he's a master criminal. He's going to get away with anything. Plus, I've noticed as well, I mean, it's not 100% true, but some people who have lawyers in the family, I feel like they could do whatever they want because they can easily get out of it. They have family that know the ins and outs of law. But that's just my opinion. It's obviously not true for every family, but there's some family that are like that. Nathan, however, accepted his role as Richard's crime partner, and in return to do these deeds for Richard, he was rewarded with intimacy from Richard. This was Nathan's only driving motivation to do these things, unfortunately. So, over time, their list of crimes grew to include arson and theft. But soon, Richard tells Nathan he plans to transfer to the University of Michigan in the fall later that same year. And without even needing to think about it, Nathan quickly decided to follow his crime partner and lover to Ann Arbor. So at Michigan, these boys roomed together until Richard became an active member of a fraternity named Zeta Beta Tau, which I'm hoping that I said the name right. And he completely abandons Nathan. Completely abandons him. So Nathan is just staying in his dorm, moping and studying with a few other Jewish boys who hated the frat scene as much as Nathan did. So, even though Richard did spend a very large amount of time drinking, playing cards, etc., he graduated from Michigan in 1923 at just age 17. And this made history at the university because he was the first kid to ever do that. Not anymore. Someone actually passed his record years later, but during this time, he was the youngest graduate ever at this university. So in 1924, Richard then returned to the University of Chicago in September to enroll in a constitutional history class for law. He wanted to become a lawyer. And by then, Nathan was already enrolled at that exact university for law school, and they renewed their friendship. So I'm assuming that when Richard abandoned Nathan in Michigan, Nathan's like, I only came here to be with Richard. Richard doesn't want anything to do with me. His friends are dumb. I'm going to leave. I don't feel like I fit in. I need to go back and finish my undergraduate degree in Chicago and just stay there. And I think, if I remember correctly, the reason why Richard distanced himself, I can't remember which boy got the note, but either way, it brought Richard's attention of basically being called gay. I'm putting it in a nice way. But fraternity brothers were writing letters, not saying nice things. And Richard being used to the it boy, the popular boy, the favored one, he didn't want to ruin his reputation. So he just distanced himself from Nathan completely. So, Nathan completed an undergraduate degree at the University of Chicago and graduated his fraternity, Pi Beta Kappa, and was attending law school. Okay? Because like I said, that's when Richard and Nathan rekindle. Okay? At this time, he claims to have been able to speak 27 languages fluently. And he was an expert ornithologist. And Nathan was really looking forward to transferring to Harvard Law School after taking a family trip to Europe. So meanwhile, he was teaching 4 birding classes, dating his girlfriend Susan Laurie, and now that Richard was back, he was continuing this bizarre relationship with him. By November 1923, Richard begins this obsession with committing the perfect crime. And the plan had begun to take shape. It wasn't so much the idea of this specific crime that attracted these boys, but the idea of getting away with it. By this time, Nathan was a firm believer of a concept called the Superman. It's the idea to rise above all good and evil. These people believe it represents a future, ideal human who creates their own values, rises above conventional slave morality, and finds meaning in a godless world. In Nathan's mind, you can't get caught. You are invincible. You can do and say what you want, and you will not suffer any consequences. Nathan was an atheist. He didn't believe anything. So, if you don't believe in anything, you got to believe in something. So he was creating his own rules, his own morals, his own values. Just everything his family pretty much taught him, just throw out the window. Okay? And Nathan's statement for his thought of the crime, because Richard voiced to him what he wanted to do, what his goal was, and his statement was, for the commission of the crime itself, I had no enthusiasm, but the feeling of deep repugnance. So he had a very strong dislike and was very disgusted with this idea. He didn't want to do it, but because he loved Richard so much, he was willing to do anything for him to make him be happy, which you should not do. And he continues by saying it's just an experiment. It's as easy for us to justify an entomologist in impaling a beetle on a pin. So, for the rest of his statement that I just read, I'm seeing that he's trying to talk himself into it. He's not okay with it, doesn't want to do it, but he wants Richard happy. And he thinks, oh, Richard only wants to do this once. It's only going to happen once. It's going to be quick. It's going to be painless. Planning and thinking about it and then doing it are very different things. Very different things. And we all know that when we plan and picture how things are supposed to go, it doesn't always happen like that, does it? So officially, on May 21st, 1924, at 5 p.m., Richard and Nathan lured a young boy from their own neighborhood into their car. The name of this victim was Bobby Franks, age 14. And Richard was 18 years old, and Nathan was 19 years old. Young Robert Bobby Franks was born on November 19th, 1909. Bobby was a brilliant student at Harvard School. As a member of the Harvard debate team, he had argued against capital punishment. Bobby was the son of Jacob Franks. Jacob made his fortune financing Chicago real estate and earned the title Honest Jake Franks because of his reputation for square dealing. The boys first considered kidnapping the son of Walter Bear, or the son of Clarence Coleman. But Bobby Franks, whose family lived across the street from Richard, was chosen at random instead. Because all the boys that they were watching with Nathan's bird glasses, they were in a cluster. And they were just waiting for hours to wait for one of the boys to be alone and go home and snatch. But because all the boys were together and turned a corner, they didn't have someone. So when they turned their head that day and saw little Bobby by himself, walking by himself from school, that was their target. So Bobby knew Richard, but not Nathan. Bobby Franks and Richard Loeb had often played tennis together on the Loeb family courts. So he was invited over all the time to play tennis with Richard. And here's the kicker. Franks was also a second cousin of Richard. His cousin. The weapon they used was a chisel wrapped in tape and stuffed Bobby's body in a culvert. After this deed was done, Nathan shared his personal thoughts. And he said, "There's no turning back now. How on earth could I ever have gotten involved in this thing? It was more horrible than I figured it was going to be, but it's behind me now. I never believed that we'd actually go through with it. I need to stay one step ahead of the police. Nobody is going to suspect me. I just need to do all the ordinary, normal things I've always done them. I will stop at a drugstore, call my girlfriend to confirm our date for tomorrow night." The next morning, on May 22nd, 1924, the Franks family received a letter that was made as a special delivery, and they discovered it was a ransom note demanding $10,000 in unmarked bills for the return of their son, Bobby. But before Mr. Franks could pay the ransom, police already discovered Bobby's body. The original person who discovered Bobby was actually a man named Tony Mink, and he was a Polish immigrant railroad worker. There was no evidence linking the criminals to the crime except for a single pair of glasses. Now, morticians initially assumed that the glasses belonged to Bobby, and so they placed them on his body. But however, the boy's father would then say that the glasses did not belong to Bobby at all because he had perfect eyesight and he never wore glasses in his life. So police soon discover that these glasses belonged to no one other than Nathan Leopold. So, if Nathan hadn't lost his glasses, the boys might have gotten away with it. And Richard would have succeeded in his goal like he planned. Now, the question is, would they have stopped there? If the boys believe in the Superman, that you are above all good and evil, you are invincible and will never suffer any consequences, Richard successfully lived his goal, felt that adrenaline rush. I don't think he would have stopped. He would have wanted to continue. And I really do believe that Nathan would have moved mountains for this boy. Would have done anything for him, anytime. But that's my thought. But fun fact for a second. Ryan Gosling, who plays Richard in the film, actually threw up after one of his scenes. The director calls cut after he does this very dark, brutal scene of taking somebody out. As soon as the director says cut, he threw up. And so, learning this, when I watched the film again, I noticed that with his eyes, any type of violence, really, Ryan's uncomfortable. So at least we know he's not like the real Richard. Because he cares about people. And then the character Justin in the film throws up. And Ryan threw up for real. Poor guy. Anyways, let's go back to the case. So Nathan made another statement on how Richard was after the crime happened. In the crime, Richard believed right and wrong didn't exist. He'd do anything, and it was all a game to him. He reminded me of an 8-year-old, all wrapped up in a game of cops and robbers. So, to me, with my mindset, I'm trying to put myself in Nathan's shoes here. He already knew about the Jekyll and Hyde characteristics of Richard. He never knew what kind of Richard he was going to get. And obviously red flags. But he really loves and cares for this boy. And Richard makes him feel good. For someone who's awkward looking, not very social, if a popular boy, the it boy, gives you attention, it makes you feel good. You feel like a somebody. And you're going to want to say and do anything to keep this person in your life because you don't have any friends. You have nothing else. So even though there's red flags, you still see the good person in them because they treat you right sometimes, which you still should not stay in this relationship or friendship, whatever you want to call it. So this exact day, I think Nathan saw Richard, the real Richard, for the very first time. He saw what Richard truly was and who he was. So I can just picture him being scared at this point. He wants out. He does not want this person in his life anymore. But at the same time, he knows that he knows too much. Nathan knows too much. If Richard can do this to a family member, chances are Richard's going to turn around and do the same thing to him. So he's stuck. He has nowhere to go. His life is over. So he has to stay. He does not want Richard to do the same thing. That's my personal thought of where I think Nathan's head went for a little while. But that's just my thought. On May 25th, 1924, at 2 a.m., Richard drives to Jackson Park and uses pliers to pry off the keys from the Underwood typewriter they used to type the ransom notes. The keys are placed into a small bundle, and the bundle, along with the typewriter in its case, are thrown off the bridge into the Jackson Park Lagoon. Okay, the boys even grabbed the victim's clothing and other evidence that was used, which I'm not going to name. It was just so brutal. And they drive back to Richard's house. Then the boys grab all the evidence and they go into Richard's basement and burn them. So later that morning, Nathan Leopold Jr. is brought to the state's attorney's office for questioning. He made a statement about his movements and being familiar with the swamp. 4 days later, Nathan is brought into questioning again by Detective Robert Crow. Now, Robert Crow was both the chief investigator and chief prosecutor in this case. But from 1916 to 1921, Crow was a judge of the Circuit Court of Cook County. By all accounts, Crow conducted his investigation of the Franks case in a thorough and professional manner. No doubt also, he enjoyed this hunt. Like, he wanted to make sure that this case was brought to justice. This guy knew the ins and outs of law all together. So who better than to try and take these boys down? So early the next morning on May 30th, same year, 1924, Nathan was brought back for more questioning. And this time, Richard Loeb was also being interrogated. Now this part just makes me laugh, because this is where it crumbles. Their whole plan just poof. On May 31st, detectives question the Leopold family's chauffeur, Sven Englund, who lived in the family's garage. So Nathan's family chauffeur is being questioned. When the detectives asked about Nathan's car, Sven and his wife confirmed that it had been in the garage all day on March 21st, the day of the crime. However, the chauffeur provided a key piece of evidence in the mounting case against the two boys. So when the chauffeur gave him this key piece of evidence, Crow's response was, "I think we've got him." And I believe it involved a rental car. So, when Richard was confronted with Sven's statement, Richard demanded to speak with Crow and the district attorney John Spabaro and began confessing the true story of the murder. When told that Richard was confessing, Nathan also confessed that they had rented a Willie's night car and took and killed Bobby Franks. They ratted each other out. That's what I think is so funny. I read the transcript. So honestly, I think if Richard did not cave, it would have been fine. So after the confession, Nathan would tell Detective Gortland that he thought he'd be able to talk his way out of the situation as he had on the 25th. Pretty much the very first day he was being questioned. And had he known that Richard would squeal, he would have just taken himself out and tried to take some cops with him. So the confessions of both boys were written down and then they were read aloud when both boys were together. So each made comments after the confession of the other boy. So the boys are basically telling each other's side, one at a time. Richard goes first, then Nathan, but they are arguing with each other on the facts. Oh, that was the wrong street. That was the wrong time. We didn't do that. We did this. Stuff like that. So although their confessions did verify most of the facts in the case, neither boy wanted to take the blame for the actual deed. Because I believe that the person who actually does the action will serve more time than the person who is just the accomplice and watched. So no, the boys just did not want to take the full responsibility of who did what when it involved young Bobby Franks. So I'm not going to read the entire transcript since it was so long. I mean, it was literally 65 pages. And the details are very disturbing and upsetting, but it really did show that Richard loved to talk. I mean, he loved the attention. So he was very detailed with his answers. He repeated a few things after saying details like streets and where they were going, but then he would be like, "Oh, pardon me, I meant this." Like, he was constantly correcting himself with some details he may have gotten wrong. Now, Nathan, he was more straight to the point and didn't take as long with his confession. So the transcripts show to the detail of what they bought, where they went, how long they have been planning this, what materials they used to do the deed, where they left evidence, where they destroyed evidence, etc., where they went to eat. So much detail. And if you want to see the real transcript, it is located in the info below this video. And I will say, after reading this transcript, I wanted to cry. Yes, this crime is so sad and heartbreaking and dark and twisted, but if you watch Murder by Numbers, you do not know the accuracy of all the facts that were placed in the movie. Yes, some things were used differently, so that way it's fiction, but there's truth in it. It just gives the movie so much more meaning. It's the work is just phenomenal. Like specific details. They include little details. Like during the case when they're trying to solve it. I'll give you a few examples. You see a clock that says 9:27. In real life, that was the time that they dumped the body. When Cassie Mayweather, who's played by Sandra Bullock, goes to check the sprinklers for the time, 3:30. In real life, that was Nathan's statement that he was home in Kenwood while the crime was taking place, and that a witness saw him at home, which was a lie. It's little details like that. You even see pliers. You see a screwdriver. You see them burning evidence. The boys are being interrogated. You see the real stuff. You see the real facts. But this movie was a masterpiece. I don't know. To me, if you involve real details hidden in a fictional film, it just makes the movie so much more special and so much more real. That's my opinion. So the one piece of evidence I will gladly share with you from the transcript comes from Nathan's side. And I chose this specific piece of information because this is like the biggest part of the story. And Richard decided to leave it out of his confession. So this is the statement. After you started out there, Nathan, did you remove your clothes at all while you were placing the body? Yes. My coat. Just how did you place the body in the drain pipe? I think it was head first. I had a pair of rubber boots. Where did you get the rubber boots? They're mine. Did you take them from your home? Yes, sir. I put them on right at the culvert where I stepped into the water. And he goes into detail of what he did, but I am not going to share that since it is very dark. So we're going to skip forward a bit. At the time you had taken your coat off, did you lay it on the ground someplace? Yes, right by my shoes. That is not the time you lost your glasses. No, that is not the time. Richard had run across the railroad track to see if anybody could be seen from the other end, and I went up to the top of the railroad track for some reason to put on my shoes, and he brought my coat to me. Oh my gosh, you guys. Okay, seriously. It is almost midnight. I was nearing the end of the editing process and noticed that everything malfunctioned. I'm fortunate enough to record as much as I have, but I swear this is why it's taking like so long for me to get this video done, because I literally feel like the spirit of Richard is like, nope, not today. We're not going to be revealing what I did. It's not happening. Well, sir, it's happening. We're going to get to the bottom of this. Things are going to be revealed. So I'm going to start where I last left off. I'm so sorry. We were on a good rhythm, but let me get the transcript and the rest of my research and we will get back to it. Just 1 second. So starting where we left off, I'm just going to backtrack just a little bit. The person questioning Nathan at this point in the transcript, he's asking, "That is not the time you lost your glasses?" Nathan says, "No, that is not the time." Richard had run across the railroad track to see if anybody could be seen from the other end. And I went up to the top of the railroad track for some reason to put on my shoes. And he brought my coat to me. We had a flashlight with us, and it must have been at that time that the glasses fell out. So this whole time, pretty much after the deed was done, it was still daylight. The boys went to go get food, drove around until sundown. Little Bobby was in the back the entire time, and nobody knew. Like, these boys even interacted with a few people while they were driving around, and no one knew what they did. So once the sun was down, they finally took action to hide Bobby. What time was it again that you put the body in the drain? About 9:30 or 9:20. That's in the transcript. And in the movie, they just put it to 9:27. Because no one really knew the exact time, especially if Nathan is saying 9:30 or 9:20. So why not do in between 9:27? Richard brought your coat up to you where you were putting on your shoes. Yes. To me, this is the biggest piece of evidence you can find. Why? Because I believe this shows how much of a betrayal this was. Richard did not want to take the fall. Richard was not loyal to Nathan. I personally believe Richard had a plan to get out of this all along. We already knew that Richard had a knack for coming up with stories to get out of things. Back when he was doing little crimes, he always had a story under his sleeve. So what I personally think happened that night was Richard did not believe he was going to escape. He was not going to succeed. They were going to go down. So, who better than to take the full blame than your partner? Nathan fully trusted Richard. He wouldn't have questioned Richard. So what I think happened, Richard literally takes in all the details. He does not want to leave any evidence behind that will connect him to this crime. So, he needs a scapegoat. He watched Nathan leave. This is not in the transcript. This is what I'm assuming happened that night. Richard saw that Nathan left. Richard, not wanting any evidence that is going to link back to him, goes back where little Bobby is laying, looks around, and then he sees Nathan's coat. He grabs it, and he's like, wait. Searches through it, finds his glasses, and drops them. by little Bobby, so that way they could be found. Feeling satisfied, he makes sure nothing else is around that links to him, takes the coat, Nathan's coat, in his arm, and goes up to where Nathan's at and gives him the coat. After the glasses were confirmed to be Nathan's, the parents of the boys hired the best and most expensive criminal attorney they were able to find, and his name was Clarence Darrow. After their statements, Darrow knew both boys would be convicted, 100%. So, his goal was to save them from the death penalty. After these confessions, on June 1st and June 2nd of 1924, while both boys were housed in separate rooms at the Windermere Hotel, they led detectives around the south side of Chicago and would point out where they had disposed of Frank's clothes, as well as the typewriter used for the ransom note that they dumped into the Jackson Park Lagoon after the crime. Then, on June 5th, 1924, divers were able to find the typewriter in the Jackson Park Lagoon, so at least the boys were telling the truth. And finally, on July 21st, it was the first official day of the trial. So, anticipating that Darrow was going to do a possible insanity defense, Crowe immediately proceeded to retain the 4 best-known alienists, also known as forensic psychiatrists in Chicago, to analyze and test these 2 boys. So, according to one psychiatrist who examined the boys, they had a king-slave relationship in which Nathan played the slave to King Richard. I mean, Nathan will bow down to Richard, will not question him, will say yes to anything. Basically what I said before, he will move mountains for King Richard. Other evidence, however, tends to suggest the relationship was far more complicated than that description suggests. The strange nature of their relationship is revealed in a lengthy October 1923 letter to Richard, in which Nathan wrote, "When you came to my home this afternoon, I expected either to break friendship with you or attempt to kill you, unless you told me why you acted as you did yesterday." So these boys are very toxic together. They both have anger issues. It's just twisted. Crowe represented his case with the same thoroughness as he did with his investigation. On August 22nd, 1924, Darrow's closing statement for the trial was that he admitted the guilt of both of his clients, but argued that forces beyond their control influenced their actions, which honestly, I don't think the boys felt guilt at all. The boys were actually laughing and smiling during the trial. Darrow even convinced the judge to spare both boys. So, on September 10th, they received life in prison rather than the death penalty. Both boys were sent to Joliet Penitentiary and were later transferred to Statesville Prison, which I'm very surprised that both boys stayed at the same prison. I would have separated them. These boys are toxic. I really don't picture them being placed in the same exact cell, but just to be near each other,
I can just imagine them still passing notes here and there, because if you're an inmate, you're going to try and find a way to still communicate somehow. But that's my thought. After Nathan's conviction, he ended up becoming a remorseful prisoner. He continued his obsession with learning, eventually mastering 28 languages. 28. He taught other prisoners, volunteered for malaria testing, reformed the Joliet Prison's library and educational system, and worked in the prison hospital. So just weeks after the boys were given their sentence, Richard's father ended up passing away by a heart attack in the month of October, and the rest of Richard's family later moved up to the Highland Park. So while members of Nathan's family, the Leopold family, changed their last names to distance themselves from the crime, Richard's family, the Loebs, did not. They did not change their name. They kept it. And 1 month after the boys were sentenced, Nathan's father sells his home and moves to Lakeview near Belmont Harbor. And the two older brothers of Nathan did change their last name. They were no longer Leopold, but Leopold. They didn't want anything to do with Nathan at this point. And I really don't think that they made any contact or visited him, never saw him again. They lived quiet, private lives away from the public eye while managing the family's paper mill and pursuing respected careers. By 1927, Nathan's father marries a woman named Mrs. Daisy Hune from Los Angeles, California. And finally, on April 5th, 1929, Nathan's father passes away. On January 28th, 1936, Richard was attacked by another inmate named James Day in the shower room. James was not convicted for this assault because he stated this was all self-defense, and Richard was trying to make intimacy advances toward him, and James did not like that. So the situation was left at that. So hearing this incident, Nathan rushes to the prison hospital to be by Richard's side as he passes away, and he ends up passing at age 30. By 1958, Nathan Leopold was officially put on parole and was released after spending 34 years behind bars. Crow offered to write a letter supporting Nathan's release from prison on the condition that the letter would not be made public until after Crow's death. Unfortunately, no letter was ever found. I swear, the more that I mention Crow, I just feel like it's Cassie Mayweather, because she was very thorough with her work as well. It just gives the essence of Crow in the film. At his release, a reporter asked Nathan if he ever did feel remorse for the crime he had committed when he was 19 years old. And his statement he gave was, "Looking back, I can't understand how my mind worked then. Remorse didn't come until 10 years later at its full flood in prison. And since then, remorse has been my constant companion, and it's never out of my mind. Sometimes I just can't think of anything else." So after his release, Nathan Leopold migrates to Puerto Rico, where he studies birds. Obviously, because what else? He taught mathematics at the University of Puerto Rico and worked as an x-ray technician in a hospital operated by the Church of the Brethren. His constant movement from job to job suggests that he had a very strong tendency to easily become bored. So that's why he's doing so many things. He even commented that helping others became his chief hobby. So he wanted to do nothing but help people. In 1961, he married a widow named Trudy, who was working in a flower shop in San Juan. So 5 years out of prison, Nathan concluded that his time spent in prison had come to be worth the joy of his freedom. Then, in the late 1960s, the Leopold mansion, Nathan's family mansion, was officially destroyed. The property was torn down due to decades of community disgrace and neglect, and pretty much it was turned into a vacant lot, and then later down the road, the community decided to split the property and pretty much just build smaller homes. So there's no longer a mansion there, but several different homes. And then finally, on August 21st, 1971, Nathan Leopold Jr. passes away due to heart trouble brought on by his diabetes. Before he passed, he wrote a will that stated he wanted his body to be transferred to the University of Puerto Rico for medical research. And he and his wife Trudy did not have children. So the author of a book on the Leopold Loeb trial, his name is Hal Higdon, he saw Leopold in his last years and labeled him as nostalgic, and he was wanting to be loved and even wanting to be seen as a human being. And that's the end of the story, you guys. But I'm so glad that you guys stuck around this far, for those who have, and you got to hear about the entire case, what happened, how everything unfolded, and it just still blows my mind that these boys just ratted out each other. But if you guys enjoyed something like this, please let me know. And even if you know a true story out there, please comment below, list it, and I will look everything up and even do a video about it as well. Photos if they're available. But really, you guys, I think this trial, this case, even brings awareness to the public. Because please, whatever you do, do not walk alone in public. Don't be anywhere in public by yourself. Bring a friend. Just bring people with you if you're going somewhere. Because we don't need to be ending up like little Bobby. Like, even when I went to college and took a social class, you think that's about socializing with people, and it can be, but really it's about learning about your community and what you can do to help. And my professor even brought awareness into the room where you with places that you should not be by yourself. Even the parking garage at the mall, if you are by yourself, do not go in there. You park outside where people can see you, because there's no cameras in there. Anything can happen. I'm sure some parking garages have cameras, but still there's blind spots. So in a way, these cases is a type of awareness. so that way you don't make the same mistakes
like little Bobby did. But yeah, if you guys enjoyed this case, give me a thumbs up, a follow, and please stay aware of your surroundings. So until then, you guys, please stay safe, take care, and I will see you next time on MJ on Watch.